It's good to be here, and I'd like to thank Richard and Pia for the organizing of this conference. I'm going to talk about one of the studies that we just completed, which is the patient treatment survey. Yeah, so first, I'd like to first acknowledge the person who actually designed the survey and single-handedly conducted Martha Aki, who's a doctor in pharmacy and a ME/CFS patient herself. I think this reflects the dedication and initiatives of many patients, caregivers, and their relatives. I think some of them are in the audience. So as a researcher myself, I just want to show my deepest gratitude to all what you do, including Richard and Pia, for organizing the conference for so many years. The preprint is out since last December, which you can find it online, and the paper is accepted at PNS, and I hope it will be out soon. So here's a brief summary of what's included in the survey. There were almost 450 questions, so it is a burden to a lot of patients with ME and long COVID. And again, I'm truly grateful for what they contributed to this study. The questions went from patient symptoms and comorbidities to patient self-reported effects of over 150 treatments on their overall health and individual symptoms. And in addition, for a lot of those treatments, we collect their dosage information and the duration of the treatments. The survey is still available online if anybody would like to check it out. So this is just a brief summary of those treatments that we surveyed. It by no means comprehensive, but it was mainly selected from the clinicians' guidelines for ME/CFS, as well as communications with the patient community. So here's, because of time, I'll just talk a little bit about what we have found. So this is a brief demographic information of the patients. As you can see here, for long COVID patients and ME/CFS patients, both, as we expect, are female dominant, and in terms of their age range, they're also quite consistent between the two conditions. Here's the summary of the disease duration as we expected for long COVID. The average duration is 1.6 years. For ME/CFS patients, it's more than 10 years, as we all know. And in terms of patient severity, the ME/CFS patients is a little bit more severe, perhaps as we expect as well, comparing to long COVID patients. And I highlighted the percentage of people from moderate to severe to very severe. Very severe means they're bedridden and need a caregiver. And moderate to severe means that they're often homebound. So roughly 50% of patients are in the moderate to severe category, and roughly 30-some% for long COVID. I wouldn't go into the details, but as a lot of you guys already know, patients with ME/CFS on the left side are quite similar in terms of symptoms to patients with long COVID these days. And most of those prevalent symptoms are the ones that everybody in the audience know well. This is a brief summary of the main results, so I'll go a little bit slower on this slide. What's shown here are the patient self-reported back up. Yeah, so here are the patient self-reported outcomes for each one of the treatments. And I only listed here those ones that are clearly self-reported as beneficial to the patients. And they're ranked based on the p-value. So what's shown here are much better after treatment, moderately better, slightly better, no effect or unsure, and slightly worse, moderate worse, and the last one is significantly worse. So it shows the percentage from 0 to 1. And as you can see that those top treatments, they seem to be reported by a large percentage of patients to be beneficial. And you guys probably immediately recognize that a lot of this have been spoken many times during this conference. And on the right side are the reported effect of each one of the treatments on patient symptoms. Because of space, I only listed those 5 cardinal symptoms as everybody recognizes. And as you can see, perhaps expected, few treatments would affect all the symptoms of the patients. So fluids and compression stockings, these are well known as we know. So is pacing, and antihistamines and mast cell activation treatments. Those are classic, as we know, in ME/CFS. Low-dose naltrexone, we just talked about it, together with mestinon. That's the trial that Dr. Sistrom and Eunice are working on. I'm just showing the point that if you look at the response in patients for low-dose naltrexone, they're pretty much on fatigue, PM, and brain fog. In contrast, if we look at mestinon, the predominant response has to do with POTS. So that perhaps is a piece of evidence underlining the trial that's currently being conducted. Beta blockers, as we know, would reduce heart rate. What we found, again, I'm skipping a lot of details, and anybody who's interested, please look at the publication that has more details there. But what we found was ivabradine seemed to significantly outperform beta blockers, as well as other treatments for this purpose. Melatonin, as we know, IVIG, a lot of folks talked about at this conference, seems to be quite positive. Vitamin B2 and CoQ10 and curcumin. What we found here is that when we look at different brand and different dose and different formulation, perhaps as expected, injectable treatments seem to significantly outperform oral treatments, and the enhanced bioavailability seem to help, and high dose for at least these 3 treatments seem to significantly outperform lower dose. And we got the lymphatic drainage and vagal nerve stimulation. These are, as we know, non-pharmaceutical treatments. A couple of treatments that their response was a little bit unexpected for us. One is the nattokinase, lumbrikinase. As some of you might know, these are so-called proteases isolated from either fermented soybeans or some of these insects. And they're in vitro studies that they would digest, for example, microclouds, and they're very, in my mind, very limited human studies that shows that they indeed do this when you give them orally. But as you can see here, there are almost 1,000 patients, more than 900 reported that they're taking those, and the overall response seems to be positive. So that would be one of the potential candidates for further investigation. Another one, sort of along the same lines, is, as we know, long COVID has been implicated with the dysregulations in anticoagulations and antiplatelets. So these are the treatments that patients also tried, turned out in ME as well, and it seems like they also reported positively. ADHD stimulants, among a number of neuropsychic treatments that we surveyed, this is a subset of treatments that seem to benefit patients. We also surveyed, you'll see in the next slide, SSRIs, etc., and those do not seem to help. So one of the things that you might notice is that comparing to some of the other treatments, the neuropsychiatric drugs, there's inherently, apparently, a significant percentage of patients that would report negatively to those treatments. So I think it's important to figure out who those patients are and how to avoid it. Maraviroc is also another one that we didn't know it would work. And it's approved as an ACE drug, but as you guys know, it also, the mechanism is that the molecule binds to CCR5, and whether it is immune modulation, we don't really know, but that seems to be another treatment that we found interesting. As everybody knows, as expected, the worst response among all the treatments that we queried is from graded exercise therapy. Overwhelmingly, people responded negatively. We used vitamin C, the oral version, and not liposomal as a control. So all the effect of patient self-reported outcomes are compared with vitamin C. So those ones that have significant benefit would be ranked higher. Another way of looking at this would be, one could say, I only care about the treatments that make people significantly or at least modestly better. So those are the ones that one can get from our results, and perhaps some of the patients can consider discussing with their physicians, trying out some of this. This is what I was talking about. If we just only rank treatments that had the highest negative response, obviously the last one is graded exercise therapy. But then, as you can see, almost all the rest have some neuropsychiatric response, and they typically have something like a fourth or more of patients that will respond negatively. We then compared the treatment effect as reported by patients of ME/CFS on the x-axis versus long COVID patients on the y-axis. And as you can see, this is the diagonal line. Most of the treatments would fall on the favored long COVID side. And if we do a statistical significance test, 3 of them stand out. This potentially is consistent with some of the ideas that if you actually treat patients early on, maybe that would help the patients. The 3 that stood out, for example, this is the if I remember correctly, B1 derivative as a supplement and certainly, arginine, all those ones can be further explored. The next we did was to see whether we can actually, since we have roughly 4,000 patients, whether we can actually subgroup them based on their symptom and comorbidity profile. So we roughly separated patients into these 4 clusters. One has most symptoms, and the other one, class 4, would have least symptoms. So the numbers here shows the percentage of patients in each cluster that have that symptom. Class 2 seems to have high POTS, and the class 3 apparently do not have POTS, but have higher rates of brain fog, sleep problems, and pain. So the question then is, if we look at their treatment response, whether they actually have different rates of positive response to different treatments. And because of time, I wouldn't be able to go into the details, but just show you a couple of them. So for example, IVIG seems to have significantly higher rate of positive response among patients who have POTS. And the ADHD treatment seems to be response the most beneficially for the cluster of patients who do not have POTS but have other issues. There are certainly significant limitations of this study, as everybody in the audience know. It's not a randomized survey. It's in a sense open label study of patients' self-reported outcomes. Therefore, there are multiple factors that can affect patient response. As we know, we tried to use vitamin C as explained as the placebo, but you can argue that the placebo effect between different treatments probably wouldn't be exactly the same. And obviously, randomized control trials are the way to go to validate some of these findings. And I'm glad to know from this conference there are a number of trials ongoing at the moment. So just to summarize what we found are patients of ME/CFS and long COVID in this study seem to share very similar symptoms as well as treatment responses. And treatments reported by patients are largely consistent with, as we know from this conference, the consensus guidelines and the thinking of research community at this point. There are several other ones that probably require further investigation. Most of the treatment had varying effect on different symptoms. So patients with different symptom profiles potentially can discuss with their physicians to choose some of these ones depending on their symptom profile. And a word of caution, especially for the neuropsychiatric drugs, the negative response rate seems to be significant comparing to other ones. And in terms of the next steps, we're trying to develop predictive algorithms. I think that's probably in many folks' mind by linking patient profiles with the treatment outcomes. So we can help patients and their physicians to potentially choose treatments that might fit their particular symptom profile or health record. We're conducting surveys on some of the selective treatments that either they're important and we would need to know more, or as this is one example of Xolair. There are only 11 patients in our survey took that. As we know, it's a mast cell drug, but among the 11 patients, overwhelmingly patients responded positively. They got much better. So the question would be, whether this is actually a subgroup of patients that have really, really significant mast cell issues, or whether these type of treatments can actually be applied a little bit wider. So that's what we're currently doing, and we're working with some of the sisters societies like Mast Cell Activation Society to see whether they would be able to adopt some of these tools in their research, and perhaps that can help us to understand the disease better. So with that, I'd just like to thank all my collaborators and the team in the lab, and especially patient researchers. So this is a list of patient researchers over the past 2-3 years I got a chance to work with personally, and as a computational person, they really helped me to get to the reality and know what patients care about. So I really appreciate all their contributions, and the Open Medicine Foundation, as we know, especially during this, this unusual weather in the U.S. The foundations and the private donors, as well as every patient, I think your support made us keep going, and hopefully we can together solve this disease eventually. Thank you.